The first important message of this chapter is that fear, perfectionism, or blocks are part of life, and we all experience them on different levels. Some a temporary, general worry, or some as deep anxiety and panic, and we're frozen with helpless feeling. They're all natural, even the unfortunate, difficult ones. I have experienced them all in person, from anxiety to existential fear. They paralyzed my life and shrunk me down to the helpless instant of now. Same as the destructive ego affecting my creative freedom, through the perfectionist approach creating a massive wall you can't climb or cross. I knew them all and I survived to tell. From the observation to the attention to the process I went through while it happened, I can share some critical insights that might help those of you seeking to overcome your concerns and use them in your creative process. So, let's talk about fears. During certain phases of research, some fears may emerge. Fears of getting lost, of being judged, overexposing deep, intimate thoughts or feelings, almost as if we stand naked and vulnerable in front of others. I remember those fears, and once I allowed them to teach me an important life lesson, I consider them positive things through which I had to find the courage for out-of-the-box solutions. Each creative act needs, by its nature, a bold approach to dealing with ourselves and those who surround us. The courage to create chaos, an earthquake, avoid, and go into the unknown. As control-loving creatures, spending time in the unknown is fearful. It exposes our lack of belief in ourselves and the lack of trust we need to reestablish with our most intimate being, concluding that something fantastic awaits us at the end of the process. It's always in our benefit for our own well-being, even if it's not visible. Always. The word fear is too powerful and contains different types and levels. One of the most common fears of all times is of the unknown and the uncertain. We can't cancel those fears from our existence. They're primary and have followed all humanity since its genesis. The creative process, because of its drive to authenticity and a deeply personal expression of who we are, takes into account at the same time the courage that comes with it, which is also primary within us. In that case, since fears can't be diminished, we can only increase our courage and trust to match the proportion of our fear. Once we give fear its legitimate place, we can understand its dimension and what kind of a creative solution is needed in the form of trust in ourselves. What helped me in that phase was the fundamental acceptance that we are not our fears. This means that there is a separation between what happens within us through the physical or psychological sensations and our awareness. Fear starts for a particular reason, but once it has developed, it then depends on us if we identify with that sensation. Once we identify with it, we become it. Fear is a protective feeling that works to our benefit to help us in times of real threats. In other situations, it brings a message or a sign for us to understand. As with every alarm system, sometimes it creates false alarms. A false alarm of fear, a wrong signal to our body, which is now in motion and takes time until someone finds the switch to shut it off. So the only thing to do at that moment is not to identify with it, but try to separate it from us. It's happening, but it's not who we are. As with every skill, such detachment requires practice and constant improvement by keeping a safe distance from fear and entering into the role of the observer. As a scientist who examines a clock mechanism, we need to slowly engage in dialogue with the fear itself by asking questions to observe what it does and how it works. Well, the fear is changing our perception of time. The stronger the fear, the closer we get to the moment of now, the immediate instant. Fear works and acts in the now. The difference between living in fear and living in that moment with creativity is the level of comfort, freedom, and positivity we allow ourselves to move through. Fear tends to cancel movement. It paralyzes us because it tends to bring us to one point. On the other hand, creativity creates free movement in all directions and expansion. Many techniques prepare us gradually for the creative process, such as everyday practices or habits by which we can get there with fewer worries and triggers. There are also some methods used when fears are already rising that instruct us on how to place fear in the proper place without allowing it to take over. I give those exercises to my students based on a deep and complex understanding of their needs at that moment. Sometimes it's about placing things in the proper context and proportion. Sometimes it's the guidance they need to know that someone is walking the path with them, that they're not alone and everything happening along the way is just right. I mainly strengthen them by making them realize that everything they go through is an integral part of the process. In my experience, in the moments of fear, crisis, or any other extreme feeling, it is highly recommended to look for signs and immediate expressions of the fear in us. Each artist in his language does it through characters that he is familiar with, whether it's a sound, a chord, a brushstroke, or a fast drawing, a movement or a short dance, or any other way that translates the experience into an authentic sign that reflects the truth of the moment. Through this act, we detach a part of ourselves from the fear itself and observe it from the outside, where it transforms the whole event into a more positive and creative process. It is recommended because all senses are heightened and sharp in that moment of an emotional peak. Your sensitivity is in its best condition to reach new original insights. The fear gives us a great chance to discover new things about ourselves and the creation we are working on. Some of my most extraordinary insights and inventions came during anxiety and panic attacks. It was very unpleasant, terrifying, and freezing, but even those moments can be transformed into moments of discovery of knowledge. In most cases, when the moment passes, our system is still alert and in perfect sensitivity. That's the time to ask questions and receive answers, document them, and engage in dialogue with ourselves. Fear brings our vulnerability out to the open. The layers are peeled and the ego is put aside. Our source reveals itself and exposes its originality. That's the perfect moment to look inside and observe a new side of ourselves or our relation to our creation. Let's talk about ego. We all have it. We all work with it and use it in different situations in our lives. Sometimes it helps, but with creativity, not so much. The ego, and I don't mean to enter into psychological theories, is the higher me who demands its importance above all. There is a thin line between self-love, which is necessary and always important, and egoism, which comes from judgment and puts the self above the rest, saying, I am better, more talented, more worthy than all. Self-love comes without any relation to others or anything. It is pure, clean, and recognizes the beauty and actual value in us without canceling or competing with the beauty or importance of those around us. For the Creator, it is necessary to love Himself, contain and appreciate Himself, and receive with understanding and love all His sides and layers with positive value. That's the security He needs to stand against all uncertainty and shakedowns of reality and against all negative voices of the good people, quote unquote, around Him who try to take Him away from His center. Nevertheless, the ego works out of a void, the absence of something. It creates a false power and irrational and useless competition with the world. It nurtures itself through the weakness of others. The ego itself can't afford to show weakness. In that game of hidden forces and the need to constantly win, letting go, giving in, or synchronicity with ourselves is its most significant threat. In the creative process, we must accept our ignorance, not because of a self-dismissal, but because of strength and awareness that we can't ever know everything. We constantly need to learn, grow, and discover the new. The Creator fills its emptiness, the healthy void of the unknown, through curiosity, passion for knowledge, and the understanding of being eternal student of the world and ourselves. He, the Creator, keeps himself constantly open and exposed, willing to admit his mistakes and love them because they are the milestones toward his discovery. That's the basis of his creative growth. Creativity's first and fundamental principle is admitting we don't know something and we wish to learn. Without it, there would never be any creative work, or even man's mere existence would be in danger. If we cannot admit that we will miss all lessons and signs, the clues and insights that await us along the way, the ego says out loud, "You already know everything. Why waste your time? No one can teach you anything new." This is where the road towards self-destruction starts, towards the creative abyss. This is where the artist stops creating the new and distances himself from the original, the authentic from himself, and is condemned to copy others and create the things over and over again without any slight changes. At the beginning of each process, I always put myself into deliberate forgetfulness, a state in which I forget all I have learned so far and collected in my life from previous experiences or projects, and enter into the new one, as if it's the first ever, as if I must learn everything from the beginning, get excited and curious, and experiment as if it's the first time. There's no danger in reaching the exact solution as in the past, and there's no danger in wasting my time. I state this with certainty because after 20 years of planning and designing projects with that approach, I always reached new insights I had not known before. All solutions were innovative, unique, and different from each other every single time. Another effect of the ego is preventing a higher complex knowledge from being received because of the belief that everything starts and ends with me. I'm the alpha and omega. At that moment, we're blocking all our sensitivities which affect our creativity. Since we didn't allow the universe to be a partner in our creative process, the result will lose its potential to affect people who are exposed to our work. That's where different approach is needed to accept my role as a mediator, which controls and diminishes the ego. Let's talk about perfectionism. Many students I have taught and architects I have met have the same problem of perfectionism, believing that it's a blessed, excellent quality. Many take pride in it and flash it in their job interviews or in front of their clients. In my opinion, it's a curse. Perfectionism blocks creativity because of the uncompromising need for perfection, which doesn't allow any flexibility or imperfections within each step of the process. Within perfectionism lies a constant interior judgment, checking, as a result, shouting all the way that the work is simply not good enough. As a result, the motion moves one step forward and two steps back instead of being in a flow. In contrast, the step back is always more significant because of the fear of making mistakes. So it happens that the perfectionists go back to the beginnings again and again to make sure everything stands to the same extreme standard of the ego. In such process of an obsession towards the perfect solution, there's no room for intuition, instinct, checking limits and boundaries, or staying in the unknown. The perfectionist needs an immediate proof and security, constantly feeling that everything is in its place and all that is nothing but a block towards creativity. In this case of the perfect approach, the person is following the fastest path forward, known solutions without any potential risks. The act of a perfectionist comes out of fear instead of courage. He works without understanding the complexity of the creative process with all its unknowns and imperfections. The strive for creativity and perfection is contradictory. In creativity, there is no perfection, at least not one you can foresee. Historically, the usage of geometry in the Renaissance period to express the perfection of the universe was just a partial expression of what man can say of the universe. It wasn't the discovery of the hidden laws of understanding the infinite complexity of life. The risk of that approach is the repetition of similar solutions, only with slight changes. As a result, the perfection remained inside the churches and placed spiritual practices as opposed to the people's residences and private worlds. The limited man is trying to express the universe's perfection in his invented language, mathematics. The Greeks were closer to the understanding of a perfect imperfection in their temples, where a correction was introduced in the structure, an optical illusion, a mistake to correct the limitations of the eye's perception. So things appeared to look perfectly straight, even though in practice they were nothing but distorted. They had a concept for it called antis, the free, flexible treatment of details with the hope of reaching the perfect perception. That's a fundamental critical approach that perfectionists can adopt as a middle ground. The understanding that the whole and human perfection lies in the different imperfect parts and a flexible process of flow and intuitive understanding of perception. Personally, I try to change the attitude of those who strive for perfection by focusing their energy and will on other people and their well-being. Dedicate themselves with the same enthusiasm to understand themselves. That's the right balance that helps the creative process, trying to lighten the aspiration for perfection with striving for childish playfulness and enjoyment of experimentations without any sense of responsibility. Some students start their projects with an imaginary thought of impression that tomorrow morning someone will take their plans and build the building. The responsibility that comes out of that impression, the fear of judgment and identification with their product, makes them progress slower and more cautiously, expecting perfection of themselves before even drawing their first sketch. The fear of the empty white sheet is a fear of making the wrong sign instead of trying recklessly with playfulness and enjoying the process. The perfectionist's worst enemy, the biggest nemesis, is the mistake. The creator who understands creativity knows that mistakes are blessings. There are no mistakes, and everything is a part of the process of slowly reaching the right direction. It happens through corrections, through mistakes that help you figure your correct way. Since childhood, we were taught that mistakes are the ones to avoid, and that you get a low evaluation if you allow yourselves to make mistakes. Then in time, you reach adulthood, and you are sure that life is about avoiding mistakes. Instead, for those who learn creativity, know that your mistakes are your best friends. You should strive for them. You should love them, for they are your guides towards the new and original. That's why in those early stages of research and analysis of the project and concepts, I work with students on awareness change, lowering expectations and bringing out the child in them. I try to make them fall in love with that playful process they remember from their childhood, where they trusted their instincts and were able to stay in the moment and collect more and more moments of joys and discoveries. Finally, we'll talk about blocks. In each process, same as the creative process, there are periods or moments of blocks. Writers are familiar with it as writer's blocks. With artists, it's more of the inspirational blocks. Creativity at its core touches all our layers, the mental, spiritual, and emotional, and influences our mood and motivation. That is why it's natural for each one who creates to encounter a particular block or limitation sometimes in his life. The blocks also remind us to be brave again, overcome our limits, and find the way or solution to loosen some of the seriousness and expectations. For the child who plays in the sand, there are no blocks. Whatever comes out is good enough for him. His purpose is to have fun and enjoy the temporary discoveries, the feeling of the sand, the water, the hands that change all shapes, to be in the moment, because this instant has no block. It has a flow. In times of writing blocks, I would take a clean sheet and start writing without thinking about the words. I write down whatever comes fast into my mind. The words would pile up, and with it the security in writing, until the magic would happen and I would enter into a new flow filled with immense fun just for the mere writing. This fun would quickly transform into passion and the block would disappear. Blocks are broken through actual action, with the momentary flaw, thoughtless, without a plan or expectation, just with a simple fun.